Well, Paul, we're just moved into September. So how is the season so far for the car rental companies?
Well, Eamon, I suppose like all tourism-based businesses, the 2010 season we're certainly wide of our expectations. I suppose we may be looking at a projected loss of over 2 million visitors, or close to that anyway, by the end of the year.
Yeah, from the peak.
From the peak, yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think the car rental industry has certainly suffered proportionately to that. Fleets have been cut significantly, staff costs have been curtailed. So I suppose we had a bad start with the ash cloud situation in May, June. That didn't certainly
all the bad breaks came.
Yeah. Some of the numbers I've seen, the revenues for the industry for the first 6 months look like they're over 20% down on last year. And exactly 2009 wasn't by any means a gangbuster year. And we did see in the last 18 months two of the major car rental companies go into examinership, and we've also had one of the large companies at the airport having to give up its desk at the airport.
Yes,
so it's been a difficult time for the industry, no doubt about it.
And earlier in the year, Paul, there were real fears of a shortage of cars for the peak season, but it didn't appear to work out that way. What happened?
I think it ended up being a shortage of customers rather than a shortage of cars, Eamon, really. This problem arose, funny enough, in 2009. Early on in June, July, Tourism Ireland were asking me about it. They had indications from the tour operators in Europe that they were having problems securing cars for July and August. So there was a problem last year, and there were certainly reported shortages in July of August 2009. But that prompted, I suppose, all the agencies, ourselves, the tour operators, to start looking at this and trying to gauge what the impact was going to be for 2010. Remember 2010, at the time we were looking at this, 2010 was going to be the year of recovery.
That's correct.
And
the volcanic ash wasn't anticipated, obviously.
So that didn't happen. When you look at the numbers, in the preceding 5 years to 2009, the average new cars added to the car rental fleet were 22 or 23,000 new cars every year put on the new car on the car rental fleet. In 2009, that was 6,600, and to date in 2010, it's just over 7,000.
Yeah, so that raises another issue as well. It means that there are more used cars on the fleet of necessity, and that's not something that's long-term viable, really.
That, no doubt about it. The car rental fleet has aged, and where tourists were used to getting a new car coming into Ireland, they were now this year, and so the shortage problem, we've got away with it this year essentially by using older cars, and but the core problem is still there.
I suppose, like most complex problems, Paul, there are several aspects to it. But isn't the short peak season the real problem? Fleeting up for that critical 4 to 5 week period, and then not having adequate levels of business after the peak to justify that investment in the additional cars. Is there anything practical that can be done about meeting that peak demand?
Well, unless the profile of the season changes, unless we get away from this peak season, this 6 week peak that we get in July, August, and really there is no indication that that's going to happen, then we are left with the problem, as you said, Eamon. How do you ramp up a car rental fleet for a 6 week, 7 week period, or whatever it is, without a vehicle disposal mechanism in place? And really what happened in 2008 was, when the government changed the VRT scheme, the valuations of used cars throughout the whole Irish market just plummeted. Car rental companies were left with cars. Car dealers on the buyback programs couldn't sell them. So the whole thing became dramatically undermined. And then when the government phased out the VRT relief scheme, and the funding crisis, that all exacerbated the problem.
There was a bit of talk around earlier this year about the possibility of importing cars temporarily from Britain or from Northern Ireland to meet that. Is that a runner at all?
Well, this, along with the, car rental companies in Ireland cannot hire out Northern registered or British registered cars.
That's the law.
That's the law. And a novel idea, I think probably proposed originally by Tourism Ireland in the sense that reflecting their All-Ireland remit. And we looked at it and we endorsed it. We didn't think maybe the transport economics of it made a lot of sense, but we did endorse it. We went along with it and a formal proposal was made on that, but firmly rejected by the Department of Finance and Revenue Commissioners. They just felt that administratively it wouldn't work. So that's dead in the water as far as I can.
So there's no joy there. Well, we're trying to move to more positive things. Airports, of course, are a great source of business for your members. Yeah. So you must be looking forward to the opening of Terminal 2 at Dublin Airport in November.
Well, I mean, the car rental industry, Eamon, is very dependent on airport business. I think it was 85% of visitors last year came through the airports.
Correct.
So anything that's going to grow business through airports in terms of visitor numbers has got to be good for the car rental industry. Unfortunately, I suppose, as many commentators are saying, the timing is pretty terrible. The rental industry is going to face next year having to man essentially two facilities, one in Terminal 1.
But that is a temporary arrangement, isn't it?
No. We're going to be left with Terminal 1 facilities and Terminal 2. The multi-storey car park that's going up at the moment will have separate facilities for the car rental, and it'll also have the car rental forward space and cars in there as well. So look, if the premise on which T2 was built was to come to pass, and it's going to be good for the car rental industry. It's a marvellous building. We congratulate the TAA on it, and who knows, in 10 to 15 years, people will be looking back on this and sort of saying, who's the genius who had the foresight to build T2, you know?
And finally, Paul, if you got a few quiet minutes with the Minister for Finance before he pens his upcoming budget, what would you be asking him to consider for the car rental sector?
To some extent, I think the government has to decide what it wants from the car rental industry. The government is committed to spending lots of money on tourism marketing, but it's of no value if the product and the infrastructure is not right. And I would sort of say that the model we have for supplying cars to the car rental fleet for a peak season without some economic method of disposing of those vehicles in place, we're going to have problems. As I said, we got away with it earlier this year. And I wouldn't, and I've never tried to portray this essentially as a car rental problem. It's a tourism problem. I think in your introduction, you mentioned, Eamon, about the various businesses around the country that are highly dependent.
Indeed.
And in fact, I was I drove on Sunday, a gorgeous day, from Kinsale through Skibbereen up to Kenmare. And I'm saying, what a wonderful product we have. To put people in a car and give them the freedom to travel is wonderful, and it would be terrible to put that in jeopardy. And I just think to have the risk, I think it's very risky to allow essentially the state of the Irish used car market to determine if we can have cars on rent during July and August in Ireland. I think that's terribly risky. And I think hopefully the Minister for Finance, and we're going to meet the Minister for Tourism shortly, and to try and see what we can propose.
Okay, well, we'll keep looking for a remedy, because we do need to find one. And as you said, so many other sectors of the industry and the more remoter parts of Ireland are dependent upon us finding a solution that will allow tourists to visit and stay on their premises. So best of luck with that, Paul. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you, Eamon.